Welcome to Higher Ed Athletics, powered by Pilotics. On this episode of Higher Ed Athletics, I sit down with Dr. Ziggy Siegfried, the athletic director of the Evansville Aces. He's been there since April of 2022. Prior to that, he was the athletic director at Bakersfield from 2014 until 2022. Ziggy gave me a tour of the athletic facilities before sitting down with me in the men's basketball team lounge for a great conversation. We first talked about his strategy and approach in Evansville with USI, another D1 school just down the road. Will they ever play in men's basketball? What's the market share like? How are they approaching kind of the beyond Evansville, all the way up to Indianapolis to try and get new fans, reach alums, and just try to kind of gather that market share? And I asked whether the fans there are already kind of set in their ways on whether they're a USI, the public school, or if they're with the Evansville Aces, the private school. Then we shifted gears to talk about his communication approach with donors and fans, which gave me the perfect opportunity to talk about donor fatigue. Then we talked about this idea that the athletic director position is really shifting to more of a revenue generation, not just fundraising. And this is where it got interesting, talking about naming rights. As an institution, Evansville is very bullish on naming rights, and they don't have very many obstacles like some larger schools might have that are also public and state funded, where you have a lot of policies that can slow down that process, which then gave me a natural extension to talk about the uniform patches. And Ziggy kind of shared a lot of not just the strategy they're taking, but also about the obstacles involved when you're dealing with maybe the conference level or you're dealing with the surrounding area, and whether the approach is to go with one team or just the basketball programs. Everybody has the same, and what his approach there is. And then why are his deputies also GMs of men and women's basketball and what that looks like? I went into it wondering if they were mostly just kind of that sport administrator role and this was just a new title to go with the times. That's not the answer at all. He would, in a perfect world, hire GMs of these basketball programs, but he saw a need and he describes it very well. And that might be something that any of you listening, you might need to hear about what that separation of those roles. And I got to see that in action. I also sat down with Joel Zimba, the executive deputy athletic director, and I was in his office while he was kind of putting that GM hat on before we went and got coffee. And so it's just an interesting approach there. And then Ziggy talks about coaching hires and how he does it. And just so happened that same day, there's a coaching change with the women's basketball program. And so it was kind of fresh on his mind, I can tell. And he talked about why he decides to use a search firm and his approach to his hiring. And it kind of goes back all the way to his experiences at his previous institution. I asked him to reflect on the biggest challenges he has as an AD and then what the best part of the job is too. And the conversation wraps with something I've never talked about on the podcast, the potential great conversations that could come out of a room if you had college and high school ADs sitting together and talking about their jobs. Thanks for watching Higher Ed Athletics. All right, so with Evansville, I think for one, I'm not going to ask you like quiz you on how big it is, but like I don't think a lot of people realize how big Evansville actually is. And ever since USI also became Division One, I'm kind of curious, like how's that work between the two universities? Like, do you feel like most people in your time here, they're already kind of set into which fan base they are, or do you see it as like if we keep winning, there's this sense of rivalry to try and win the city? Like ever since they went Division One, I'm just kind of curious like what that balance is like at University of Evansville here in the city.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is like I have a really good relationship with the AD there, John Mark, and we do work together on things. I do believe here in Evansville, a lot of people talk about what the West Side. That is what some see as kind of like the USI side, and maybe everything else is University of Evansville. But in reality, there's people that are fans of both. There are people that have a long history with UE who maybe are not interested in being fans of USI. So it's one of those things where we're fortunate because we've been around a pretty long time, had some success. Even going back, we're in the Jerry Sloan Lounge right now. We have Evansville across our jersey. So I think we're in a really good position in our community because of our history. But we also realize that we have another Division One program right down the street. And the way I approach it is, we try to be good partners. Obviously, if we're playing each other, I'm going to want to win. Otherwise, I root for them. So it's. I don't know if that really explains it, but
Well, do you clearly in different conferences, probably always will be, in my opinion. But as far as like non-conference scheduling, do you all play each other in anything yet, or is it kind of just if it's possible to get a game type of thing?
yeah, so we play each other in a lot of our sports. It's been kind of a hot topic here in town. On we have not played in men's basketball. For us, it's we have a beautiful Ford Center arena, and we're willing to play. We want it to be at the Ford Center each time. For them, they want it to be at their place, and they're like a home and home.
Are there other pockets outside of Evansville that you all are trying to reach? When you think about Southern Indiana in general, even getting close to the state line, I mean, if you guys, for example, have a really good men's basketball season, you could, pick up some more fan base. Is there, is just trying to, expand your roots? Is that something you all have tried or plan to try in the future?
Yeah, and we do, and a lot of it tends to go north, so more towards Indy,
Yeah.
and trying to have, we're in Indianapolis pretty consistently. We have tons of alums there, but yes, I mean we have alums that end up in Chicago or St. Louis or even into Kentucky, which is backyard here. So we always want to expand. I think the one thing about University of Evansville when it comes to our donors, we rely heavily on a lot of large supporters, but we're going to them constantly. So it's really important for us to expand our pipeline and expand our reach because that's going to be part of our goal in growing. We need more than just the top people supporting us.
Before we get back to the show, I want to tell you about a new partnership I have with ONRISE. So, for those that aren't aware, first 10 years of my career, I was actually a student athlete academic advisor. Mental health concerns and the betterment of student athletes has always been top of mind. So, finding a partner with the podcast where I don't really get to talk about that part of my life as much has been really helpful to kind of just showcase the great support that you can get. If you support student athletes, you know that mental health resources can be hard to implement, even harder to scale. OnRise provides complete mental health coverage, but built specifically for your athletes. With one call, programs can launch same-day access to peer support from retired athletes, licensed clinicians, and 24/7 crisis care. It costs less than hiring one full-time staff member, with no hiring hassles and no initiative fatigue for your department. To learn more, visit onrise.care. That's ONRISE.care. Now let's get back to the interview. Yeah, donor fatigue is obviously real too. And you mentioned donors, and I'm kind of curious. I'm always looking to talk about communication with those people. There's a lot of changes going in college athletics, has been really ever since COVID now. When you're explaining that to your fan base, really, I assume institutional leadership understands it, and that's easier to communicate things to. But when you're talking to your donors, your supporters, or your fans, trying to explain what does this mean, whether it's something that is maybe not affecting you all at this point, but like if they hear any type of college athletics news, just kind of curious, like how has it been to try to educate the donor base, the fan base, and also communicate how it affects the Aces?
Yeah, for me, when I first got here, I heard often that they wanted more transparency from the athletics department, more communications, and I've done that. I'm very upfront with people. I have the AD's updates that we do on social media. We've done podcasts. I am communicating via email a lot. I formed an AD's council. And so I'm constantly, I probably am more, I more have probably challenges sometimes. I got to be careful about not oversharing, but I have a very open, transparent approach. And people have responded well to that. Now, different people respond differently. Our top supporters, who give a lot of money to us, seem to really understand and resonate with my message about the importance of, revenue share and NIL. sometimes those that maybe have not been as invested from a dollar standpoint with us, you know, see that when I'm, publicly talking about how bad we need more money for revenue share and NIL, they may see it more as an excuse. So there's a mixture of responses that I get, both positive and negative. But for the most part, those people who are kind of diehard Purple Aces fans and those people who are donating to us, they really understand the message.
Or do you ever get the sense of, and you don't, I know it doesn't come across this way intentionally, but as an athletic director, say those donors that are the ones that give the most, and you go back to them, the same time. If an AD says, we need more or something like that, do you ever get the sense of like, and this can be more of an advice thing for the future ADs too, that it can come off complaining as far as like also feeling like making them feel like ungrateful? Like because when I talk about donor fatigue, and I've had a couple people on to talk about that, you clearly aren't going to be ungrateful, right? Every dollar counts, but like you're trying to communicate that like this matters, but we do need more because we need to keep building, and you can kind of explain why. But like if people don't expand that donor base and start getting those either smaller gifts or a few more of those larger ones, an athletic director does risk alienating their donor base, don't they?
Yeah, and the individuals who are giving, they're wanting to invest and they're wanting to succeed, they see success, and they want to see it kind of quickly. So I do try to be really careful about not requesting things, requesting donations, and turning it into anything that would negatively portray, us at the university. So yeah, what I say sometimes is there's, the book Good to Great talks about confronting the brutal facts. And I like to do that. But a lot of times those top supporters will come back to me and, they don't necessarily want to front the bill, for instance, with NIL and revenue share each year and run the risk of their investment uh, not having sustainable success. So a lot of what I am selling is, hey, in addition to asking you for dollars, donor A, I'm over here, I'm working, I was in Indianapolis this weekend and, talking to some people who are contributing that maybe have not in the past. Or here's what we're doing in the athletics department to be strategic and invest in resources in these areas. So I try to just make sure they see the whole picture, because the more educated they can be, the more they know that we are working tirelessly to move things forward.
Yeah, and I actually wondered about that. We talk about donor fatigue, talk about trying to get more donors. Well, now I feel like there's this sense of, we're seeing this with, I do AD hiring trends and looking at some of the backgrounds, not necessarily fundraisers, but they're revenue generators, right? And so it used to always be, and I had an AD tell me this off air when I visited, saying that everybody's saying like all these new ADs got to be a fundraiser, they got to be a revenue generator. I was like, I've been doing that before we came up with the keyword revenue generating. He's like, what do you think fundraising and being an AD was the last 20 years? Well, so like it is a new buzzword, right? Revenue generation. We're seeing that in the AD hires. Like, what are you all doing to try and generate additional revenue, kind of take that strain maybe off of your donors as well?
Yeah, and it's a great thing you bring up, because you're right. I was always told, and it's the route I went, that you need to be a fundraiser to be an AD. I am a fundraiser, and I have been for.
Say, hopefully you still are.
Yeah, and I still am. So, but you're right. The word of revenue generation is, we can't just rely on those supporters, those donors. And so some of the things we've done is we've had to be creative. Some of the internal things we've done is scholarship realignments for all of our programs to be able to maximize maybe those that we're investing a little bit more dollars in to be successful. We've looked at ways, something that's popular here in Evansville is your 50-50 raffles. A lot of ADs would say, I'm not doing that, but we have a thing called the Fall Festival here that's generating $2 million from these half pods.
Oh wow!
And so we implemented that last year.
I might need to get a few tickets.
Yeah, hey, it's I always buy them. So looking at all different aspects, one thing we look at now is how many games do we need to play guarantee that we can then use for NIL rev share. So especially at a private school like the University of Evansville, where you really don't have the opportunity to push additional student fees like you do the state schools, you have to look at this like it's a business. We need to generate money. Anything that does that is going to gain a lot of attention from me.
I am kind of curious. Talking about having to basically run like a business. Um, the popular things is naming rights. I also know from being in higher education that a lot of times institutions have policies regarding and processes about naming rights. And so, is that even something that you all have the ability to do, or does the city of Evansville control like also the Ford Center? Do you get anything from that as well?
Yeah, so the Ford Center is something that outside of some sponsorship elements that we have, those dollars are not directly coming back to us, but we're using naming rights significantly. When I first got here, we got the new softball field, and that was thanks to a partnership with Tri-State Orthopedics. Before I got here, baseball partnered with German American for German American Field. So we're always looking at naming rights and generating revenue. There are some instances, since we partner with Learfield Sports, where we obviously have to, look at, kind of what's the inventory that they need to be successful versus what we need to sell to be able to generate, revenue for our department. So naming rights, a hot topic. It's one of my favorite things about the University of Evansville is we have a strong partnership with our university advancement office. So like there's not as many, I've been at other universities where sometimes there's more politics involved when you're going to look for those naming. Here we don't have that. And so if I know someone's interested in doing something, I have a partner in our vice president, Abigail Whirling in advancement, that it's going to find a way to say yes.
Well, I remember in my doctorate program, really, I think this was 3 or 4 years ago, we had to come up with a project as far as a fundraising class. And so I did my project over, you had to come with 2 revenue streams. So I said, okay, like you had to factor in policies. And I said, okay, naming rights to, like the IU football stadium, because I was an IU doctorate program. And, since they've done that, they did the field, like some people are doing it the field so they don't alienate the World War II version of the stadium. The other part of it I did was on uniform sponsorships. And so I used my very limited Adobe skill or Photoshop skills and added I think I did like Anthem Blue Cross, or because they're based at Indiana. And so I put that on just I think I did IUPUI for that one, IU Indianapolis Now, just to see what it would look like. And I did my paper based on that. Now it's a reality. And so what are you all doing as far as like your approach on actual uniform sponsorships? I'm kind of curious, like where you're at in that development stage. I think it's kind of a wait and see at this point with a lot of people.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's a hot topic. So where we are, we know individuals, more companies that are interested in doing these jersey patches, and we've partnered with Purple Aces Sports Properties through Learfield to identify those individuals. Where we are trying to make sure we do things the right way is you have different elements of the jersey patches. So first, let's start. We're in the Missouri Valley Conference. Well, how is it going to work? Because we sell sponsorships that are more the inventory of the conference. And we got to make sure whatever we sell, that it fits the overall conference goals with patches. For instance, if I go out tomorrow and I sell a patch, let's say for $250,000 to go on our men's basketball jersey, I have to then go and say, okay, Missouri Valley Conference, I am going to be able to allow these, wear these in the championship tournaments, right? Or I'm going to need to go to Learfield and say, hey, is this something y'all see as your inventory or our inventory? Because when our deal was done, this wasn't in the contract about jerseys. Obviously, it's addressed as far as new inventory that comes available. So where we are right now is we know we can generate revenue from jersey patches. We know we have people that are interested. Now we're at the phase of let's do it the right way and let's involve our partners who also have a stake in this, the MVC, Learfield, and people like that.
Is there, do you get the sense, and I assume it's okay because you're already doing this at naming rights facilities, and you talked about the flexibility, but I'm also curious how university leadership feels and campus stakeholders feel about the idea of, a jersey patch, because that's got to be another element. Commercialization in higher education was always an issue. This just like kind of threw it, into another territory. But like, have you gotten any sense of concern or like excitement about university administration with this too?
Yeah, I will tell you, our President Petroskevich, if it's something that is going to move our university and community and department forward, he is going to, he has the philosophy of finding a way to say yes. Just needs to be coordinated. And that's the biggest thing. So lots of support on campus. Now, I will tell you, and this is kind of a joke, and I think it was last April 1st, April Fool's Day. Uh, and I'll get to my point here in a second, but they posted something on social media, some random burner account, that I had sold patches to like Bush Light, and they put Bush Light. I can't remember who else it was, but it was basically maybe a company that could be controversial, whether it be gambling or beer. So I say all that to give an example of something that was funny, because I actually had ADs in the MVC say, "Did you seriously?" They didn't realize it was April Fool's Day. Um, but it's going to be important that whoever is going to be that visual on your jersey, that it's the right partner, that it is someone that fits within our overall values. And by the way, alcohol, we do allow alcohol here. So, and Bush Light is very popular.
You can just tell those ads, no, I'm holding out for Coors Light.
That's right. That's right. My old place would have actually liked that.
Yeah, the mountains are blue.
Yeah.
Would have been good. Well, are you more about the idea of um, letting different sponsors or be with different sports, or are you thinking like it's going to be across the board? Because the way I look at it is, and I'm not in this role, but it reminds me of not that long ago whenever some people didn't even have like uniform apparel across the board in their departments. They would have maybe one sport would want to do this because it's more sport specific. Are you thinking in like program specific, maybe men and women's basketball are one, and then other sports you kind of more flexible with what you want to do?
Yeah, I've kind of, I haven't decided on that yet. I think for us it would be awesome to have a huge deal that is enough money that we can have one partner put them on all the jerseys. If that doesn't happen, or if there's more complexities around how we're going to handle it from a conference standpoint, I do think there is some interest and potential for making it about each individual sport. Because what I find is we may be able to sign a big deal that has all the sports, um, but we can actually maximize and help some of our underfunded programs by going to someone who may have an affinity for a specific sport, who will pay more for that jersey. So maybe it's someone that just wants to be on golf on their polos. And it's like, I love the golf program. If this is also going back to support them, I'll be willing to give, probably triple what I'm getting back in value.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to see what people do, and we've really only seen like we're here at the end of March, and there's really not been that many announcements. And as far as like how people are even looking at it, I've asked several ads on the podcast, and some are saying we're wrapping it into our MMR deal, we're going separate, we're going all together. It's almost just like a wait and see game. I want to talk about your staff for a second. I know from working at a school in the Valley, just really a couple years ago, and knowing the Valley schools really well, knowing the really non-football D1 and FCS schools, their structure of their staffs usually are pretty limited. You look like you have, I mean, everybody's always going to want more staff, but like you seem to have a pretty robust staff with responsibilities clearly laid out, even as far as on the directory. But I've gotten to know Joel, I've gotten to know Logan on your team and other people. And so like, it seems like you all have a pretty good footing for being able to manage based on the size of your institution and really comparative to your league, maybe.
Yeah, I am fortunate because I think people That's who, drives organizations and helps with success. We've been able to, anytime you come into a new role, you have to make tough decisions. Sometimes you want to bring people in that fit some of the needs here, in addition to some people who are already at the organization who you see as having institutional history and also being talented at what they do. I think we found a good mesh of, yes, we have some people who were here when I got here. There's probably not a lot made with or compounded with those that we have been able to bring in and hire, sort of like names you mentioned, Joel Zimba, who serves as my number 2, who's been phenomenal, and Logan Bells. He's worked with me now for 12 years, so wow, long before here, and those are individuals that I got to know extremely well, and I knew where they would kind of fit well within our organization, and they've been great. So yes, could we always use more staff? Absolutely. Do we have great people here right now? It is by far the best it's been since I arrived, on who we have here, all the way from staff to coaches, and I feel really good.
Well, so last thing about the staff is, you've had your deputies be more of a GM role, also with the men's basketball, another as a GM in women's basketball. How different is that from, like, it's always been they have sport administrator roles? Where do you kind of change that? Is it more of a title change, or is it like just a more involvement as a sport administrator? Because even sport administrators would be very involved in the roster. Like, they know where someone's from, they know their initial eligibility, they know the recruiting. So how has it changed now, or is it really just fitting the keyword within the structure of like where college athletics is going?
Yeah, for us, I mean, the ideal situation for a department is you hire new staff, and you hire new staff that can take on new roles, like a general manager position. For us, we didn't have that luxury. So, I always thought about, okay, how do we make sure we're evolving with the new landscape, while I know that we're still not quite where we need to be to, pay someone to come in new and only focus on being the general manager for men's or women's basketball. So what I did is Joel Zimba, again, our executive deputy AD, I did make him sport administrator for men's basketball and general manager. And same thing with Sarah Solinsky on the women's side. So my goal in that was, yes, I was adding additional duties, but I also wanted to make sure that they had the opportunity to evolve with the landscape. So I'll give you a great example. Joel, who mainly oversees external, in addition to being, his big role here in the athletics department, but he has been a game changer when it comes to his general manager role. And we talked about this at the beginning of, what does this look like? I did not ask him to come in and raise money in that role, which some people do. I wanted him to be a part of the program, which he has been. They all know him. He's actually right behind the bench at all the games. I wanted him to get the structure right. Too many conversations were taking place about NIL that I didn't feel like we were organized, and I didn't feel like we were hitting on the fulfillment piece. Maybe there was a promise made from an assistant coach, but ultimately the people who had to fulfill those promises, didn't know about the offers. So what Joel's done is he's brought organization to it. And quite frankly, it's why I'm sitting here today with kind of a smile on my face, that we're in so much better position now with those that we are working to retain on our men's basketball staff. And that's because of Joel and his role, and also our head coach, David Ragland, and them being in alignment.
No, that's great. I think that'd be really helpful for people too that are kind of curious about how they can get those extra roles, and then also for, newish athletic directors to kind of design that role as well. Let me ask you, what do Clemson, Charlotte, Coastal Carolina, and Boise State have in common? These athletic departments decided to use data with context, turning that data into action in hiring coaches, writing contracts, and doing long-term planning. They did this by partnering with AD VANTAGE. After 10 plus years as a D1 college coach, founder and CEO Tanner Stump saw a gap. Athletic administrators didn't have the tools to find not just the best coach, but the right coach for their program at their institution at that time. Most industry solutions he did see were expensive, outdated, or lacked sport-specific insights. So he decided to build AD Vantage from the ground up, bootstrapped, customer first, and focused on the future of college athletics. Before we joined forces, Tanner let me get my own username and look under the hood as an AD looking to hire some coaches. And I can truly say this is a company and product that athletic directors and sport administrators need. Visit athleticdirectorvantage.com to get a demo. Tell them Travis from Higher Ed Athletics sent you, and ask them about the rating score they created called Coach Effect. And gonna kind of round it out with a couple last questions, but I'm curious, always asking about someone's hiring philosophy with coaches. Okay, so I partner with AD Vantage. It's an incredible software where you can basically look at all these types of analytics, and they do a coach effect score. And you know, they're new, but it's so effective. I did their Tanner Stump gave me a tour. We pretended I had to go find a volleyball coach because we did this episode around volleyball season ending, but I was just amazed by it, and it made me start thinking. I was like, I need to really ask athletic directors more about the candidate pool, because I'm always curious about this, and this will also be a local thing too that I'm here across Indiana. But you can take a general, you can pick a sport, whatever's easier for you. But I just want to know, like, how do you go about finding the candidates? How much of it is inbound versus you going out and recruiting someone? Basically, like, the joke used to be everybody has a desk in their drawer. They don't really have a desk in their drawer, but you're probably keeping track of all sports, and whether they're high profile assistants or coaches. So I'm kind of curious about the candidate pool, and then I'm also curious about when do you decide, or do you decide it has to be a head coach, or it needs to be more likely going to be an assistant coach at certain levels?
Yeah, this is something that I've grown a lot. You know, it was one of the exciting things of me taking the job at the University of Evansville. I got to come from a place where I could have probably stayed my entire career. I think they would have kept me there. But I learned from both good and bad that happened there. And hiring was a big part of that. So for me, you know, I try to kind of take all that in, be the person who's talking to the prospective candidates, the person who is making the phone calls. I got their uncles and aunts calling me, recommending them. I got ADs. I changed my approach really when I got to the University of Evansville. And, you know, I partnered with someone who actually helps me with some of this stuff on searches, that if I get that call from that uncle, I can say, you know what, you need to have them reach out to this person. So who I've partnered a lot with is a gentleman named Dr. Kurt Patberg with Mammoth Sports, who is also an alumnus here. So he's helped me with a lot of searches. I also use Turnkey's CRG with our men's basketball approach. But the great thing is that person, those individuals can vet these candidates. Yeah. They will sometimes bring candidates to the table. Greatest thing about Kurt Patberg is he's not just bringing me Division I candidates. Sometimes our best hires are coming from Division II, Division III, NAIA. And it's not just your, you know, men's and women's basketball. When I'm doing a swimming search, or when I'm doing a track and field search, he has those connections too. So to answer your question kind of succinctly, is I want someone that can help me where I don't have to take all the calls. Yep. I need an individual to help me with vetting, even though I'm also vetting each of these candidates before I hire them. And then I need an individual who can, you know, also know what type of characteristics that I'm looking for in a new coach. Because one thing I do make very clear, and I just did this with a group of student athletes recently, is, you know, people don't have votes. It doesn't matter if it's the search firm. It doesn't matter if it's someone on the university side. It doesn't matter if it's student athletes. I'll take your feedback. There's one person making the decision, and that's going to be me. And because
you're going to be the one that's the answer for it.
Exactly. and that's where I've made, mistakes in my previous, I say previous institution, just, I listened, and some of them were great hires, but ultimately I need to be the one making that decision. And usually when that happens, it's successful. So I could go on forever and ever about head coach hirings because it is so critical. And it doesn't matter if it's the men's basketball, more visible position, or it's your track and field or swimming and diving. You cannot miss on those.
Yeah, there was I can't remember which athletic director said this, but they said, I don't think it was on a podcast. I think it was a private conversation, but it was like, look, there's a lot of changes in college athletics, but I guarantee you, if you, that hiring coaches is still the most important thing, because that's the thing where you make a bad hire in an Olympic sport, you're still getting fired.
Yeah.
And you have to pay attention. And I think it was based on this whole talk about like outsiders coming into college athletics, that maybe, if an external person was only focused on football and men's basketball, and you just try to push everything to your sport administrators or your staff, that you still are reliable. It's kind of like that, like presidents always say, the buck stops with the president. Well, it's kind of like any coaching thing, the buck stops with the AD. And so you mentioning that just reiterates that, the importance of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to end it on just trying something new here with, we're going to start with the more difficult question first, and then end on a more hopeful one. I'm just kind of curious because I think my audience is a vast of different people, but mostly aspiring ADs and then current athletic directors as well. And this can kind of just help, I think. But and you can focus here at Evansville if you want, or going back to Cal Bakersfield, but like most difficult decision in your career as an AD. What would you say that's been?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I think they're all around coaching. And, I think even when I arrived here, I immediately made a change in the men's basketball program. And that's never easy. We had someone here that had done nothing wrong. They were a good person. I didn't know them before I got here, but it's tough to make tough decisions. And so that would be one. I think, looking back at Bakersfield, you know, at Cal State Bakersfield, I was extremely cautious on environment and culture. Like, we had a culture at that point that really we were running a great operation. And I know they've had trouble since I left, but I was very protective. If I had one person that was slipping, and I didn't have confidence that that was going to be a one-time occasion, we would let them loose. So for instance, I had a student athlete, I won't name the name, who would have, been one of our best student athletes ever, potentially. And I remember that individual made a critical mistake. And typically I let coaches make decisions, but me and the coach were on the same level. And I literally, pulled that individual in, and we let them go immediately, because I didn't want to create a culture of people who were doing things the wrong way. Because what happens, and again, I'm trying to be careful here because this is my former institution, but what happens is you have someone that's doing some things wrong. Other people, it's kind of like weeds. Other people start doing things wrong. Very protective. I tell people on day one of each year that here is my non-negotiables. One of them is, if you do not represent UE the right way, and you do something that is going to bring harm to us, you could be my best friend and you're going to be let go. And I've done that. I've had to make tough decisions on people that I know impacts their lives, but I'm always going to protect who we are as a department, a culture, because our job is to represent, our university, our city. I will never allow something to get at a level as it has at other universities where it's embarrassing.
Yeah, no, that's critically important. And I want to end it on something more positive about just, what are maybe one or two of your best moments here as an AD, and we'll stick Evansville specifically here.
Yeah, what's been amazing, some of the things that just make me smile is, our baseball program, had not won a conference championship for, I think it was 20 plus years. Not only did we win, we then went on to, make it to the super regionals, beat the number one team in the country, UT, who ended up winning the national championship because we needed to beat them twice. That was one. I think another one, and I'll name two more because I'll keep it kind of tight. Our men's soccer program had not won a conference championship since I think it was like 2006. I could be mixing up dates. But someone that I was able to hire, and not taking credit for it because they were actually, there's a lot of people who should get credit for their success, but won back-to-back championships. And lastly, um, the facility enhancements. To be able to walk outside now and see some of the beautiful enhancements that have happened. Whether it be our new Freeland Baseball Clubhouse, our new turf at softball, our new Sports Performance Center, our new softball clubhouse, our new turf field that we just did recently. Like, it's clear that we're forward moving. We have a long way to go till we reach the highest level of success, but I love seeing those wins. Mike Alden, who is a former AD at Missouri, I call him the GOAT. I have a strong relationship with him. And when he was on our campus and he helps me with a lot of stuff, he said, "You need to get base hits. I know you want home runs and you're going to get some of those, but get base hits or get first downs if you want to put a football approach." That's what we've focused on, and we've had a plan on what we want those to look like. We've gotten them, and we're getting a lot of base hits. We're getting a lot of first downs, and a lot of that is some of the things that just make me feel good when I reflect at the end of the day.
And he's a Evansville alum, isn't
he? He is. Yeah,
played
football here when we had football, and I love the guy to death. One of my greatest blessings for this job is I always knew he was the GOAT. I knew who he was. I've been able to connect with him so closely, and I consider him a mentor. And I love the guy.
One thing the reason why this in-town athletics, and it's like a blend of my passion areas, which is education-based athletics. That's why it's called Higher Ed Athletics with my college show. And then I just love the state of Indiana. Never going to move. And I've been here my whole life, minus 2 really warm years at Nova Southeastern in Fort Lauderdale. But I'm focusing on small colleges, big colleges, but I'm also focusing on high schools. Because one thing that is a concern of mine is it's very clear from people I've talked to, the high school athletic director role here in Indiana, it can be lonely because they don't really know, there's no staff really. They're learning from each other. I do think that there's things that like a high school AD can learn from a college AD and vice versa. And I have this idea of like bringing this show together, maybe in an event every once in a while, is to bring some of these high school ADs together with the area college ADs across, no matter what, whether you're NCAA Division 1, 2, 3, or NAI or whatever. Because I do think there's like the common goal is you're here for student athletes and you're here to hire coaches. You could argue high school athletics, hiring the coach is more challenging because it might have to fit with a teaching role. It's probably it's definitely not a full-time role if it's not teaching, but it's also critical because they're working with minors. So I understand like it can be a lonely job. My question to you is, what do you think that like a college AD and a high school AD could learn from each other if they got in a room like this? We filled this Jerry Sloan lounge up with some high school and college ADs from across the state. What do you think those conversations would be like?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question, and I actually have an example I'd like to share with the relationship here, because I do think that partnership is important. That brainstorming with each other. So there's a local AD, and I know several here, but the guy's name's Chad Dockery. He's at Memorial High School, which is literally right next door to us. And I think what I would encourage is both high school ADs and the college ADs build those relationships, because you'd be surprised about not only how many similarities, you'd also be surprised about how much you can partner together. Like, since I connected with him, we're utilizing their track. They're utilizing our facilities, and there's NCAA rules where we have to charge the appropriate level, but we've also been able to pick each other's brains and tie that back into our exact role. Like, he'll talk to me about my coaching philosophies when we hire. I'll talk to him about the same thing, and you'd be surprised by how many similarities there are. So I think the key is the relationship piece. Like, we've even talked about something as big as partnering on a multi-million-dollar facility because they're right next door to us.
Yep.
Like, they have resources. We have a lot of the same supporters, just us in this Memorial High School. So it's been one of the most beneficial relationships that I've been able to build here in Evansville, is with a high school athletics director who, and there's others out there that, can also give someone like me a sense of the community, and maybe what are some of the sports that are, kind of on the upswing in high school athletics, like a flag football. And again, I won't digress here, but I love your question. I love the fact that it's something that nobody is talking a lot about, but there's huge benefits from getting ADs both at high school and college level together to be collaborative.